In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it.
Welcome back to Musings of a Cigarette-Smoking Man. I'm Stephen Leake. Another day, another smoke, another layer peeled back from the festering onion of truth, or what passes for it these days. We gather here in this dimly lit corner of the airwaves to consider the uncomfortable, to question the narratives we're spoon-fed, to acknowledge the slow burn of reality as it creeps through the cracks in the official story. Today we're tracing a series of lines that most prefer to see as unconnected dots, lines that when joined paint a rather disturbing picture. I'm talking about populism, not a buzzword, not as a political strategy, but as a global tremor, a reaction, perhaps a carefully orchestrated response to something far deeper. A name keeps surfacing in this equation, a lightning rod for the disaffected. A hero to some, a villain to others, Donald J. Trump. But is he the cause or merely the most visible symptom? So, the question is this: are we witnessing a spontaneous uprising of the forgotten masses, or a carefully managed demolition of the established order? Stay with me, and we'll see if we can find the signal in the noise. Trump. The name itself is a Rorschach test. But forget the partisan squabbles for a moment. Let's look at him, clinically, as a phenomenon, as let's call it a systemic disruption. He wasn't just another politician. He was a gaudy, gilded wrecking ball aimed squarely at the established order. And the fact that he connected with so many millions speaks volumes. Volumes that the so-called experts conveniently ignored, right up until the moment they were screaming about it on cable news. What did he tap into? Anxiety, plain and simple. Economic insecurity, sure. Decades of stagnant wages while the elites insulated themselves from reality. But it went deeper than that. It was the fear of cultural displacement, the sense that something, fundamentally, was being lost, a national identity, perhaps, a feeling of belonging. These aren't just abstract concepts, these are primal needs. And when people feel those needs are being threatened, when they feel like their voices are being deliberately ignored, they lash out. They seek a champion, someone, anyone who acknowledges their pain. Trump offered them that. Whether he meant it or not is almost irrelevant. He sounded like he was listening. He looked like he was fighting for them. And in a world where authenticity is a carefully crafted illusion, that was enough for a lot of people. Consider the narrative, the constant drumbeat from the media, the universities, the political class. The message was clear: adapt or be left behind. Embrace the new world order or be branded a bigot, a dinosaur, an empty enemy of progress. But what if that progress feels like a betrayal? What if it means sacrificing your traditions, your values, your way of life on the altar of globalization? That's the question they weren't asking. And that's the question Trump, however clumsily, answered. He didn't just win an election. He detonated a bomb under the foundations of the post-Cold War consensus. The idea that history was over, that liberal democracy was the inevitable endpoint, that global institutions were the benevolent arbiters of progress. Trump exposed that as a fallacy, a fragile narrative built on a foundation of sand. Now, was he a savior? Hardly. He was flawed, deeply so. But those flaws, in a perverse way, only amplified his appeal. He was one of them, imperfect, unfiltered, unapologetically real. And that's what terrified the establishment, because he proved that the emperor had no clothes. He revealed the naked power grab for what it was, an attempt to impose a one-size-fits-all ideology on a world that refuses to be homogenized. Think of it this way. The globalist machine, as I like to call it, was humming along nicely, churning out profits and policies that benefited a select few. Then Trump throws a wrench into the gears, a big orange spray-tanned wrench, and suddenly the whole system starts to grind and sputter. And what happens when a machine breaks down? People start looking for alternatives. That's the real significance of Trump. He wasn't just an American phenomenon. He was the first major shockwave of a global populist earthquake, a harbinger of things to come. Whether those things are ultimately good or bad, well, that remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the old order is crumbling, and something new is rising in its place, something unpredictable. Are you tired of the same old bland brew, the same tired narratives, the same lukewarm conformity shoved down your throat every morning? It's time to wake up and fight back with Black Rifle Coffee Company, veteran-owned, unapologetically American, and packing a punch that'll shatter your illusions. Black Rifle Coffee isn't just a drink, it's a declaration. It's fuel for the free thinkers, the ones who see through the smoke and mirrors, the rebels who refuse to surrender their minds. Don't just wake up, wake others. Black Rifle Coffee, fuel for free thinkers. Forget the caricatures painted by mainstream press. Dismiss for a moment the labels of far right and extremist. Let's consider the why. Why has Le Pen and her Rassemblement National Party gained such traction? Why do millions of French citizens see her as their champion? It's a question of identity, won't you agree? A question of who gets to define what it means to be French, to be European. Le Pen supporters believe their culture, their heritage is under siege, that decades of open borders and mass immigration, particularly from Muslim countries, have diluted the very essence of France. Now let's be clear, these are complex, emotionally charged issues. There's no room for simplistic solutions or knee-jerk reactions. But to dismiss these concerns as mere bigotry is to ignore a very real and potent political force. Le Pen taps into a deep-seated anxiety about the changing face of Europe, an anxiety fueled by a perceived failure of integration, by the rise of parallel societies, and by a sense that the traditional values of secularism are being eroded. Her supporters see her as the defender of La France profonde, the authentic France of small towns and rural landscapes, of historical traditions and cultural heritage. They believe that the elites in Paris and Brussels have sold them out, prioritizing globalist agendas over the interests of ordinary citizens. They point to the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, to the terrorist attacks that have shaken France to its core, as evidence that the open-door policies have gone too far. They argue that the influx of immigrants, many of whom struggle to assimilate, has created a breeding ground for social unrest and cultural conflict. What they resent, what they see as a double standard, a willingness to accommodate the cultural practices of newcomers, while simultaneously suppressing traditional French customs and values, the banning of Christmas markets, the pressure to remove religious symbols from public spaces. These are seen as attacks on their identity, on their way of life. It's bullshit and it needs to stop. The narrative, as always, is crucial. The Le Pen narrative is one of cultural preservation, of national sovereignty, of resistance against the homogenizing forces of globalization. It's a narrative that resonates with millions of Europeans who feel like they're being ignored, misrepresented, and ultimately replaced. Of course, there are those who would argue that this narrative is based on fear and prejudice, that it demonizes immigrants and scapegoats minorities, that it promotes a dangerous form of ethno-nationalism that has no place in the 20th century. But even if that is true, it doesn't diminish the power of the narrative itself. It doesn't explain why so many people are drawn to it. It doesn't address the underlying grievances that fuel the populist surge. Is Le Pen's movement a defense of Fortress Europe, a desperate attempt to preserve a dying culture in the face of inevitable change? Or is it a genuine struggle for freedom's last stand, a fight to reclaim national sovereignty and protect traditional values from the corrosive influence of globalism? Perhaps it's both, perhaps it's neither. But one thing is clear. The questions she raises, the anxiety she taps into, are not going away. They're simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the next spark to ignite them. And that makes Marine Le Pen a force to be reckoned with, not just in France, but across Europe. A symbol of the growing backlash against the perceived excesses of globalization, the perceived failures of multiculturalism, and the perceived betrayal of the elites. The parallels with Trump are striking. Both figures, despite their very different backgrounds and styles, have managed to harness the anger and frustration of ordinary people who feel like they've been left behind. Both have challenged the established order, disrupted the conventional wisdom, and forced a reckoning with uncomfortable truths. Whether their movements ultimately lead to a more just and equitable world, or a descent into chaos and division, well, that's the question that will define the coming decades. The historian's tools, Skillcraft and Moleskin. In this world of digital ephemera, of fleeting tweets and disappearing posts, what endures? What tools do we have to capture truth, to dissect the narrative, to record our own damn version of events? I'm talking about the essentials. The Skillcraft U.S. government pen, not flashy, not fancy, but reliable, durable. The pen used by those who write the memos and those who expose them. Think about that. And the Moleskin notebook, the iconic black rectangle, a repository for thoughts that last, for truths that must be written. the moleskin favored by writers, artists, revolutionaries, and anyone who dare thinks for themselves. Together, they're more than just stationary. They're weapons against the one-size-fits-all agenda, tools for documenting the cracks in the facade, for sketching out a different future. Skillcraft and moleskin, equip yourself. The truth is out there, but it won't write itself. The global chorus of defiance. Elites shudder, people stir. We've talked about Trump, we've dissected Le Pen, but to think of populism as merely an American or European phenomenon is to miss the forest for the trees. What we're seeing is a global chorus of defiance, a rising tide of discontent that stretches across continents, cultures, and creeds. Think about it. From the streets of South America, where populist leaders rail against neoliberal policies and foreign intervention, to pockets of resistance in Asia, where traditional values clash with the relentless march of westernization, the same themes resonate: a yearning for self-determination, a rejection of imposed ideologies, and a burning anger at those who claim to know better. I'm not going to bore you with a laundry list of every protest movement and political upheaval. The point is not the details, but the pattern. A pattern of growing anger and backlash over being properly represented by elitist governments that have openly defied the people's democratic will. This isn't just about economics, though the economic anxieties are certainly a major factor. It's about something deeper. It's about a fundamental crisis of trust. Trust in established political institutions, which are increasingly seen as corrupt and self-serving. Trust in the mainstream media, which is perceived as a propaganda arm of the ruling class. Trust in international organizations, which are viewed as unaccountable and undemocratic. They sell you the idea of democracy, don't they? But what does that word even mean anymore in a constitutional republic? When elected officials routinely ignore the expressed will of the people, when referendums are overturned, when dissenting voices are silenced, is it any wonder that people start to question the very legitimacy of the system? The globalists, the elites, the self-proclaimed experts, they all preach the gospel of interconnectedness, of open borders, and of global governance. They tell us that we're all citizens of the world now, that national identities are obsolete, that traditional values are relics of the past. But what happens when that vision clashes with the lived reality of ordinary people? What happens when they feel like strangers in their own lands, their cultures eroded, their jobs outsourced, their voices drowned out by the cacophony of global capital? They resist, they push back, they seek out leaders who promise to restore what's been lost. And that's where the danger lies, because populism, like any powerful force, can be easily manipulated. It can be channeled into constructive change, or it can be exploited to fuel division and hatred. It can be a force for liberation or a tool for oppression. So, is this global surge of populism a genuine awakening, a spontaneous uprising of the masses against a corrupt and tyrannical system? Or is it something more sinister? A carefully orchestrated series of crises designed to destabilize the existing order and pave the way for something even more authoritarian and fucking crazy? Is it possible that these movements, these leaders, are being subtly guided, funded, and manipulated by forces unseen? Are they unwitting pawns in a larger game, their anger and frustration harnessed to serve a hidden agenda? I don't have all the answers, but I know one thing. The world is simmering with discontent. People are feeling increasingly alienated, disenfranchised, and ignored. They're searching for answers, for solutions, for a way to reclaim control of their lives. And that makes them vulnerable. Vulnerable to demagogues, to conspiracy theories, to false promises. It makes them susceptible to manipulation by those who would exploit their anger and frustration for their own gain. The elites may shudder at the sight of the people stirring, but they shouldn't underestimate them, because a cornered animal is a dangerous thing, and when millions of people feel like they've been backed into a corner, there's no telling what they might do. Monarch Holdings International, unlocking your potential. Are you navigating a world of uncertainty? Do you feel lost in the noise, struggling to make sense of the shifting landscape? Monarch Holdings International offers clarity in chaos. We provide cutting-edge business intelligence and strategic consulting to help you unlock your potential and thrive in today's dynamic environment. From data-driven insights and strategies to principled leadership, Monarch Holdings International is your partner in navigating the complexities of the modern world. We champion free expression, support overlooked talent, and promote freedom-oriented initiatives. Don't just survive, thrive. Visit monarchholdingsinternational.com to learn more. Whispers from the Past, the John Birch Society, and the Communist Shadow. Let's delve deeper, shall we? Beyond the headlines, beyond the personalities, to the whispers from the past that echo in our present turmoil. I'm referring, of course, to the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society, paranoia or prophecy? The John Birch Society, the name alone conjures images of Cold War paranoia, of shadowy figures meeting in dimly lit rooms, plotting the downfall of America. For decades, they were dismissed as fringe extremists, obsessed with a communist conspiracy that existed only in their fevered imaginations. But were they entirely wrong, or were they simply ahead of their time, warning us about a threat that has now mutated and metastasized into something far more insidious? Founded in 1958, the JBS, as they were known, stood as a staunch bulwark against what they perceived as a creeping tide of communism. They saw it not just as a political ideology emanating from Moscow, but as a multifaceted conspiracy to undermine American freedoms and sovereignty from within. Their core tenets centered on limited government, individual liberty, and a fervent defense of the Constitution. They warned against the dangers of collectivism, of centralized power, of any encroachment on individual rights in the name of the greater good. They identified communists and communist sympathizers in positions of power throughout the government, the media, and the education systems. They saw international organizations like the United Nations as vehicles for a one-world government, a globalist cabal intent on dissolving national identities and imposing a uniform ideology on the world. They fought against foreign aid, arms control treaties, and any policy they believed ceded American sovereignty to international bodies. Now, much of what the John Birch Society preached was dismissed as alarmist, even delusional. Their black and white worldview, their tendency to see communist influence everywhere, made them easy targets for ridicule. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's examine the substance of their warnings, stripped of the hyperbole and the conspiracy theories. Echoes in the present, a one-size-fits-all world. What were they really afraid of? The loss of individual liberty, the erosion of national sovereignty, the imposition of a centralized authoritarian system that would stifle dissent and crush individual initiative. Sound familiar? Look around you. The world is awash in global governance initiatives, spearheaded by organizations like the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. These initiatives, often couched in the language of sustainability and social justice, seek to address global challenges through coordinated top-down policies. Digital currencies are on the rise, promising convenience and efficiency, but also creating the potential for unprecedented levels of surveillance and control. Social credit systems, already in place in some countries, reward conformity and punish dissent, creating a chilling effect on free expression. Policies are implemented in the name of the greater good. Individual liberties are curtailed in the name of public safety. National borders are blurred in the name of global cooperation. Is this the one-size-fits-all communism the Birch Society warned us about? I'm not saying the WEF and the UN are run by closet communists, but kind of they are. But I am saying that their vision of a globalized, interconnected world, governed by a technocratic elite, bears a striking resemblance to the kind of centralized control that the JBS feared. A world where individual autonomy is sacrificed on the altar of collective goals, where dissent is stifled in the name of consensus, where national identities are dissolved into a homogeneous global culture. Perhaps the John Birch Society wasn't wrong about the what, but the who. Perhaps the threat isn't a cabal of communist agents, but a self-proclaimed elite of globalist technocrats who genuinely believe that they know what's best for humanity. An elite who are willing to sacrifice individual liberties and national sovereignty in pursuit of their utopian vision. The anti-communist framing is being adapted and utilized by modern populist and nationalist movements. They see these same threats: global governance, cultural homogenization, the erosion of national identity, but they frame them in terms of a struggle against globalism, against the elites, against those who seek to impose a one-size-fits-all ideology on the world. Are these modern populists merely rehashing old conspiracy theories? Or are they tapping into a genuine anxiety about the future of freedom and self-determination? Is the resurgence of the anti-communist narrative a sign of paranoia or a prescient warning about the dangers of unchecked global power? The cigarette has burned down. Time to consider those questions carefully. Monarch Holdings International, architect your autonomy. In an era defined by unprecedented complexity and relentless change, the ability to chart your own course is paramount. Are you seeking more than just survival? Are you ready to architect your own autonomy? Monarch Holdings International, Incorporated, is a unique holding company built for individuals and businesses who value individual liberty and free markets. We're dedicated to fostering entrepreneurial spirit and creativity, advancing libertarian principles through strategic investments in innovative business ventures. So how do we do it? By leveraging cutting-edge business intelligence tools like IBM SPSS, IBM Watson AI, and Palantir. Monarch Holdings International provides advanced data-driven insights and strategic recommendations, empowering you to make informed decisions and navigate the complexities of today's world with confidence. Our diverse subsidiaries reflect our commitment to free expression, supporting overlooked talent, and promoting freedom-oriented initiatives. Consider Monarch Literary Limited, championing innovation in publishing unique voices in poetry and fiction, or Monarch Urbanware Limited, providing apparel for the unapologetically sovereign individual. And through our consulting services, we offer expert guidance in business, market, and political strategy, helping you not only to survive, but thrive. Monarch Holdings International provides the tools and platforms for those who demand the freedom to operate effectively and maintain their autonomy in a complex, often restrictive world. Monarch Holdings International, principled leadership for an unconventional era. Architect your autonomy. Visit monarchholdingsinternational.com to discover more. Trump populism in the unseen hand. We've journeyed through the tremors, the Trump shockwave, the European counterstrike led by Le Pen, the global rumbling of discontent, the echoes of warnings from the John Birch Society about a creeping collectivism masquerading as progress. We've seen the symptoms, felt the fever of a world rejecting the prescriptions of its self-appointed doctors. But symptoms are just that. They indicate a deeper illness, a malfunction at a foundational level. And if you only treat the symptoms, the disease persists, mutating, adapting, always seeking a new path. So, let's connect these threads, shall we? Let's try to weave a tapestry from the frayed ends of these narratives. What does it all mean? Viewed not from the brightly lit stages of political rallies or the sterile halls of international institutions, but from the shadows. The real levers of power are often manipulated. Is this surge of populism, this global backlash against the elites, merely an organic grassroots uprising? the spontaneous combustion of anger from populations feeling ignored, exploited, and culturally dispossessed. It certainly presents itself that way. The speeches, the protests, the visceral rejection of the status quo, it all feels authentic, raw, born from genuine grievance. Or is there more to it? Are there unseen hands at play? Forces that didn't create the discontent, perhaps, but are certainly challenging it and channeling it, directing its fury towards specific targets, harvesting the chaos for their own gain. The dialectic of control and chaos. Consider the nature of power. It abhors a vacuum, and it loves a crisis. Crises justify extraordinary measures. They allow for the rapid implementation of policies that would be unthinkable in calmer times. They provide a cover for the restructuring of economies, societies, and even global governance. So, who benefits from this global instability, from the deep polarization that pits citizen against citizen, nation against nation? Follow the money. Yes, always follow the money, but also follow the control. Who stands to gain more authority, more surveillance capability, more centralized power in the wake of this seismic shift? The conventional narrative says the populists are fighting against the globalists, a clear-cut battle, right? The people versus the Davos crowd. But what if that's too simple? What if the opposition itself is part of the plan? A controlled demolition of the old, slightly less centralized system to make way for something even more tightly controlled. Think about history. Power often operates through a kind of dialectic. Problem, reaction, solution. Create a problem. Wait for the desired reaction. Fear, demand for security, rejection of the status quo. Then offer the prepackaged solution. A solution that invariably grants more power to those orchestrating the process. Could the perceived failures of the elitist governments, the open borders, the cultural upheavals, the economic anxieties, have been intentionally exacerbated, not necessarily with a grand unified conspiracy, but through a confluence of policies favored by a powerful insulated class that genuinely believes its vision is superior? And could the reaction to these failures, the rise of figures like Trump and Le Pen, the nationalist fervor, the demand for closed borders and restored sovereignty, be the problem needed to justify the solution? What solution, you ask? Perhaps the move towards fully digital economies where every transaction is tracked and controlled. Perhaps the implementation of social credit systems, rewarding compliance and punishing dissent, something the John Birch Society warned about in concept, if not in precise technological detail. Perhaps a global governance structure presented as the only way to manage a world fractured by nationalism and conflict. It's easy to dismiss this as paranoia, but I've seen too much to accept coincidences at face value. The speed with which certain narratives are amplified, the uniformity of messaging across supposedly competing media outlets, convenient timing of crises that pave the way for unpopular policies. It suggests a degree of coordination, if not outright control. Shadows and scripts. Are Trump and Le Pen, then, merely actors in a larger play? Pawns moved on a geopolitical chessboard by strategists we never see? Or are they wild cards who genuinely disrupt the script, forcing the unseen hands to adapt and improvise? Perhaps it's a bit of both. They tapped into a real reservoir of popular anger. But anger undirected is messy. It needs a lightning rod, a focal point. And that focal point can be carefully guided. Propaganda isn't just about telling lies. It's about shaping perception, amplifying certain voices while silencing others, framing the narrative in a way that serves a purpose. Could the intense focus on the cultural aspects of populism, the immigration debates, the identity politics, be a deliberate distraction, a way to keep the populists fighting amongst themselves while the real transfer of wealth and power occurs unnoticed? The John Birch Society saw communism as the ultimate threat, a centralized authoritarian state controlling every aspect of life. And they were right to fear centralization and the erosion of liberty. But maybe the entity pursuing that level of control isn't labeled communism anymore. Maybe it's called global governance, sustainable development, or stakeholder capitalism. The labels change, but the core ambition, to manage humanity from above, remains eerily consistent. Are the populist leaders inadvertently clearing the ground for a more sophisticated form of control by dismantling existing international structures, by weakening national governments through internal conflict? Are they making the world more susceptible to centralized, non-national power structures, perhaps corporate, perhaps technocratic, that operate above the fray? These are not simple questions with simple answers. The world is not a black and white movie, despite what some might wish. There are layers within layers, motives within motives. The anger of the populace is real. The perceived failures of the elites are real. The warnings from groups like JBS, however wrapped in Cold War rhetoric, contained kernels of truth about the dangers of unchecked power in the pursuit of a one-size-fits-all ideology. But the possibility, the chilling possibility, is that all this turbulence, this apparent struggle between opposing forces, is part of a larger, complex system designed to consolidate power, that the pushback is accounted for, perhaps even necessary, in a grander plan to usher in a new form of global order, an order where individual liberty is a quaint relic of the past and control is absolute, justified by the very chaos that was, perhaps, carefully cultivated. Who truly benefits from this division? Who profits from the fear? Who gains power when people willingly surrender their freedoms for the promise of security, however false that promise may be? Look beyond the headlines. Listen past the rhetoric. Feel the currents beneath the surface. The tapestry is complex, woven with threads of genuine rebellion and deliberate manipulation, and sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you didn't even know was pulling the strings, using your own anger against you. The end game, pawns, kings, and the illusion of choice. So we've reached the precipice, the edge of the map, where the comfortable certainties dissolve into a swirling mist of possibilities, or perhaps into the stark realization that choice itself is the greatest illusion of all. We've charted the rise of global populism, the figures like Trump and Le Pen, who've become lightning rods for the disaffected. We've traced the echoes of warnings from the John Birch Society, the specter of a one-size-fits-all agenda lurking beneath the surface of global governance. We've even dared to suggest that these seemingly opposing forces might, in some twisted way, be serving a similar master. But what now? What becomes of this rebellion? This groundswell of discontent, does it burn itself out, leaving behind only ashes and shattered illusions? Does it achieve some measure of genuine change, restoring power to the people, or is it destined to be co-opted, neutralized, ultimately crushed by the very system it seeks to overthrow? That, my friends, is the end game, the question that will determine the fate of nations, the future of freedom, and perhaps the very nature of humanity. The nature of power, adaptation, and illusion. Let's not be naive. Power never relinquishes its grip willingly. It adapts, it morphs, it reasserts itself in a new and unexpected way. And it's a master of illusion. It offers you the appearance of choice, the feeling of control, while quietly tightening the noose around your neck. The populist leaders, like Trump's and the Le Pens, are they the new kings? The champions of the forgotten masses, ready to usher in a new era of national sovereignty and individual liberty, in a golden age? Or are they simply different kinds of pawns on the same old chessboard, figures elevated to positions of prominence to serve a purpose, to absorb the anger, to channel the discontent, and then discarded when their usefulness has expired? Consider the cycle. A leader rises, promising change. They gain power, fueled by the hopes and dreams of millions. But then reality sets in. The system resists. The entrenched interests fight back. Compromises are made. Promises are broken. And the revolution inevitably gets bogged down in the swamp of politics. The people, once energized and hopeful, become disillusioned, cynical. They turn on their former champion, accusing them of betrayal, of selling out, and the cycle begins anew. Is this simply the inevitable consequence of political compromise, or is it a deliberate strategy, a way to manage the masses, to keep them perpetually chasing a mirage of change, while the fundamental structures of control remain firmly in place? The individual in the great game. And what are the individual? What is your role, your agency in this great game? Can ordinary people truly reclaim their sovereignty, their freedom, their right to self-determination? Or is it the struggle itself part of a larger, more complex mechanism of societal management, a way to keep the populace occupied, distracted, and ultimately compliant? They tell you to vote, to protest, to express your opinions. They celebrate your freedom of speech while quietly monitoring your every word, analyzing your every thought, and shaping your perceptions through a constant barrage of propaganda. They offer you the illusion of participation, the feeling of empowerment, while subtly manipulating the rules of the game to ensure that the outcome remains predetermined. Are we, then, merely cogs in a machine, pawns in a game we don't even understand, or do we possess the power to break free, to transcend the limitations imposed upon us by the system? I don't pretend to have the answers, but I believe that vigilance is the only true defense. Critical thinking, a refusal to accept narratives at face value, a willingness to question everything, especially those things that seem most obvious. The allure of simple narratives is strong, particularly in times of complexity and uncertainty. People crave easy answers, definitive solutions. They want to believe in heroes and villains, in clear-cut battles between good and evil. But the world is rarely so simple, and those who offer you easy answers are often the ones you should distrust the most. The struggle between freedom and control is perennial. It's a constant tension, a delicate balance that must actively be managed and maintained. And the price of freedom, as they say, is eternal vigilance. Not just vigilance against external threats, but vigilance against our own tendency to be lulled into complacency, to surrender our critical faculties, to accept the illusion of choice for the reality of control. So, what is the end game? I don't know, but I suspect it involves a lot more smoke and mirrors than we can possibly imagine. The only way to navigate this treacherous landscape is to keep your eyes open, your mind sharp, and your skepticism dialed up to 11, because in the end, the only true defense against manipulation is the ability to see through the lies. Extinguishing the embers for now. Another smoke finished, another set of musings cast into the ether. Like embers, these ideas may ignite further thought, or fade into darkness, joining countless others lost to the relentless march of time. We've danced on the edge of the uncomfortable truths of today, haven't we? Tracing the lines of populism, Trump, Le Pen, and the ever-watchful eyes of groups like the John Birch Society, exploring the notion that what we perceive as rebellion may merely be a cog in a larger, more sinister machine. The world is a complex tapestry, my friends, woven with threads of intention and accident, truth and deception. Don't mistake the shadow for substance, and never ever stop questioning. Speaking of smoke and mirrors, next time we'll be delving into the world of espionage and shadow governments, exploring the unseen forces that shape our reality, something to consider as the world stage transforms before our very eyes. I'm the cigarette smoking man. Thanks for being with me today. We're going to win.